Okay, ready to go. Dr. Lavin, take it away.
Good, thank you. Except I have one question. I've got this meeting is being recorded right in the center of my, slides. Is there any way to get out of there?
If you put your mouse on that, you should be able to click it and drag it away into the corner.
There we go. Great.
Yeah.
Out. There we go. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for this PowerPoint presentation. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about Connecticut's Native Americans and their relationship with the natural world. Now, I'm not controlling the slides. Elizabeth is. So, Elizabeth, we can go to the next slide. I don't think, there we go. Just a few comments on communities, Native communities in general. I'm sure that you are all aware of the sad history of Native European relationships. It's a miracle that we actually have Native American communities in New England, especially Connecticut, because of that. And the main reason for that is they are robust, resilient cultures that are supported by a coherent, sophisticated belief system and by intelligent, strong leadership. As this photo, this painting in the center of Mohican Grand Sachem Iduokoa. He was the Grand Sachem of the Mohican tribe, which was a huge tribe whose territory covered the Upper Hudson and Western New England. And this was actually a painting taken in 1710 in London when he and several Iroquois leaders went there to visit with the king. So on the left side of this slide, there are 4 characteristics of these communities. In fact, probably characteristics of all indigenous communities in North America. One is longevity. They've been here a long time. Over on the right is a photo of the ongoing excavations at the Templeton site in Washington, Connecticut. For many years, that was considered the oldest site in southern New England. It dated to 10,300 years ago. Recently, another Paleo-Indian site was discovered in Avon, Connecticut. Paleo-Indian comes from the Greek. Paleo means old, ancient. Those are the oldest sites that have been found in New England so far. And the Avon site dates to 12,500 years, which is a long time. But Native communities date even earlier than that in the unglaciated portions of North America. For example, Pendejo Cave, which is an archaeological site in a cave in Oro Grande, New Mexico. And there are 5 human occupation levels in that site. And the earliest one is dated between 36,000 and 26,000 years ago. And it does have human remains in there, not skeletal remains, archaeological remains. There are native, well, actually there's the toe bone of an extinct horse with a Native American tool embedded in it. It's either a point or a wedge. And there was also a clay-lined hearth, and there was a human palm print in there. And those both dated to that 26,000, 36,000 levels. So what I'm saying is that Native people have been here a really long time. And even here in New England, oral tradition by New England tribes, Southern New England tribes, claim that they were living here when the glacier was here, but they were living south of the glacier, which would put them where the Atlantic Ocean is now. And that could very easily be true because Dr. Kevin McBride has been doing underwater archaeology, as have other people in the area off New England, and finding areas that were probably used for settlements for Native people at the time. So, okay, they've been here a long time, and they've been here continuously. And we know this from archaeology sites again. The radiocarbon dates from those sites show continuous occupation of Southern New England from these 10,000, 12,000-year-old sites right up into the historic present. And then, of course, we have the early European documentation when they first visited here, when they first settled here, and their relationships with the communities. So been here a long time, been here continuously. And these communities, I should say, were never simple, never primitive, never childlike. Those are stereotypes, totally erroneous. Because they'd been here such a long time, they were able to evolve very complex societies that were very much in sync with their natural environment. They had to if they wanted to survive. So they had complex economic systems, complex social systems, religious systems, and I'm not going to get into that because we'd be here all night. So I'll just leave it that it very complex societies and also very sophisticated worldview, spirituality, artwork that is also very symbolic. So next slide, please. I do want to talk about a few of the basic tenets that underlie Native American worldview. And let me say right now, I am not Native American. I am not of Native American descent, and I don't pretend to be an expert on Native American religions. But I do know from many years of communicating with Native peoples, some of the basic tenets that underlie these worldviews, these religions. And one of them, of course, is the belief that humans are part of the natural world. Very unlike the Western idea of man versus nature, the Native outlook is that man is part of nature. And Native people are animate, traditional Native people are animists. They believe everything is alive. Not just plants and animals, but also rocks, waters, soils, every other part of the natural environment. They also believe that all of these entities are human relatives, literally physically related to humans. Literally, not figuratively related to humans. And that all of these entities, these animals, plants, rocks, soils, think, see, hear, speak. And I think we all know that human auditory system is not extensive enough to hear all of the sounds that are out there. Anybody who has an animal, a cat or a dog, you can be sitting in your house reading or on the porch and everything is quiet, and all of a sudden that animal's ears will perk up. They'll look in a certain direction. They may even growl. and you know they've heard something that you have not. So why can't plants speak? But Native people acknowledge that only few people, special people with special hearing, can hear them. Also, all of these entities are thought to have Manitou. Manitou is a spiritual essence, very similar to the Western concept of soul. And different persons, different animals, different rocks, whatever, have different amounts of Manitou. So, because everything is our relative, everything has spirituality, then everything is to be respected. Also, everything is connected. Now, this is all based, well, it isn't based, but all of our Western science supports these ideas. For example, the idea that everything is related. Well, first of all, our quantum physics tells us that everything is made up of molecules, atoms, electrons, you, me, your pets, the table, my laptop, everything is made up of those things. Another example is Carl Linnaeus's taxonomic system. Carl Linnaeus, as many of you probably know, was a Swedish naturalist and botanist, and who studied both the plant and animal kingdoms, and in the mid-1700s actually created a taxonomic system for each of those kingdoms, showing physical relationships between various species. Again, supporting this idea of everything being related, everything being connected. And talking about connected, that's general systems theory, upon which all of our Western sciences are now based. General systems theory says that everything is a system made up of subsystems. Culture, our bodies, the physical environment. For example, culture is a system that's made up of the subsystems of, economic, religious, social, political, and general systems theory also says that when something happens in one of those systems, that it affects, there's a domino effect, and it affects all of the other systems in different ways. And an example, it's a historical example actually, would be failure in the economic system, a drought coming and devastating the one's agriculture. And this has happened many times in many parts of the world in history. And so how does that affect the other systems? Well, for one thing, oftentimes the people who are starving rise up against their political leaders, and there is a total overthrow of the political system. Sometimes it even affects the religious system, where the ritual emphasis is on obtaining water, ritualistic ceremonies focused on the water gods or deities, as opposed to maybe the agricultural deities. You get the idea. So the main thing to take away here is that Native people believe that the Creator has put humans on the earth to protect nature, the physical environment, especially the balance in nature, the balance between these subsystems. Because if the balance is allowed to if you If there is an unbalance and it's not fixed, then bad things happen. Just think about our problem with climate today. So next. So a respect for the earth and all living things. This is the central theme in traditional Native American lifeways. Now, the pre-colonial Native Americans, because they've been here such a long time, and because they have these spiritual and philosophical ideas about the environment and then their protection of the environment, they had to know a great deal. They had to learn a great deal about that environment in order to survive. And so they were our first geologists, zoologists, botanists, astronomers, first pharmacists, and first environmental stewards. And I'm going to go into a little bit of those. Next slide, please. Okay, America's first geologists. They knew a great deal about the rock types in their region and even outside of their region. They knew where to find different rock types. They knew the characteristics of these rock types. They knew what they were best used for. And one example is the upper slide in this slide of these spear points and arrow points. Just looking at them, you can see, and this actually is part of the Connecticut exhibit at the Institute for American Indian Studies. It's not the entire slide. I couldn't fit the entire slide on. It started from Paleo-Indian times and went right up to the historic period. This, of course, only covers terminal archaic through. So, but anyway, you just look at the side and you can tell by the colors that there's a variety of rock types that they use to make spearheads and arrow points. And in those slides, they represent, let's see, there are cherts and flints. There are jaspers, that very large orange spear point there is yellow jasper. There are rhyolites, felsites, quartzites, quartz, hornfells, I think are all represented in there. And the interesting part is that virtually all of those points are made from exotic materials that are not found in Connecticut. Just the quartz and quartzite, I think, were found in Connecticut. The rest are, flints are coming from, most of them from New York State. That yellow jasper comes from eastern Pennsylvania. Rhyolites come from the Boston Basin, northern New England, and even Maryland. But not shown in that slide, but I do know that we found also in Connecticut, we have found Indiana hornstone, a number of Ohio chalcedonies, a Labrador quartzite, and even a unique flint from Michigan, all found in Connecticut. And this just shows that Native people knew even where they could get the outside sources for the best tool making rocks. And also, it also shows that Native people were trading these materials all the way back to the early archaic, at least, which is 10,000 years ago. Exotics are found in the Paleo-Indian sites as well, but a number of the specialists believe that Paleo-Indians are migratory and they're actually picking up these materials at sites as part of their migratory routes. So they really were terrific traders and terrific trade routes way before the English and Dutch traders actually came here. The lower right shows woodworking tools, axe heads, adze heads, gouges. They're all made out of basalt. So they knew the differences that using cryptocrystalline materials such as chert and flint and jaspers were good for cutting and piercing, but for chopping and gouging tools, basalts and other materials were much better. Next. First, zoologists and botanists, they knew a great deal about zoology and botany. They had to in order to survive. They knew where to find certain animals at certain seasons. They knew where the certain plants were growing. They knew how to dispatch them, to collect them the best way, what parts to use, what parts not to use, what parts were medicinal. And this, what we're looking at the left there, is actually a seasonal subsistence round for Connecticut peoples during the late Archaic period, which was 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. And you can see, and this by no means shows all of the plants and animals they were using. These are just the major types. And you can see that it's a broad spectrum economy. They used a great variety of different plants and animals. We can also tell this, in fact, most of this subsistence round is, which comes from my book, and also is was originally in the Yale University, Yale Peabody Museum exhibit on Connecticut prehistory, of which I was a co-director. And it's based on, again, on archaeology, on archaeological excavations, and what plant remains and animal remains we found in them. On the right is an excavation in Rocky Hill, Connecticut at the Morgan site, which was a late woodland Wangunk community. And just from that one excavation, we found 10 species of animals represented as food remains and 35 plant species as food and medicinal sources. Let's see. Okay, next slide, please. Plants and animals were not just economic assets. They were actually, many of them played key roles in native spirituality. And many tribes had animal deities that were shaped like animals or were animals or could turn themselves into animals. There were a number of traditional animal dances in the honor for that species or for that animal spirit. Many of the Native American clan names honored animals, and their clothing, their personal objects, artwork, body tattoos, many of those featured animal pictures or animal fur or feathers. And the reason for this is like magic. Like magic says that if you wear or act like a certain animal or plant or specific deity, then you will achieve the characteristics of that deity. For example, if you wear a necklace made of bear claws, then hopefully you are attempting to achieve the characteristics of the bear, which is power, um, spiritual power, as well as physical power, and any other type of characteristics that you admire in that animal. Okay, next slide. Birds were especially sacred to Native people because they fly, and they fly high in the skies close to the upper world, where many of the deities lived. Deities lived in the upper world, they lived in the underworld, and they also lived in between on the earth where humans lived. And so birds, being close to the upper world, were also thought to be messengers from the upper world, and they could also bring messages to the deities in the upper world. And this is an example. One of the birds thought to have a number of spiritual qualities was the crow. Crow is often associated with wisdom, magic, mysteries, and also, as I said, a messenger of the gods. And in fact, the crow was thought to be a messenger from the creator. The Lenape Indians, whose homelands were originally in New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania, believed that the creator sent fire to them via the crow, and the crow also taught them respect for other animals. The Narragansetts believed that the creator introduced them to agriculture by having the crow visit them with a corn cob in one ear and a bean in the other. And many tribes have crow clans. They have, by the way, all of these, this artwork that you see in these slides are all made by Native Americans. Okay, next. Oh, and I should also say that the most sacred of the birds, at least in the Northeast, is the golden eagle, because the golden eagle flies higher than any other bird, so he is closer to the upper world where the deities live, and of course also where the creator lives, who in the Northeast is thought to live in the southwestern portion of the skies. And that is where persons go, souls go, good souls go after a person dies. Their soul, if they're good, goes to the southwest and lives with the creator in his house. But if you're bad, there is a large dog that guards the gate to the creator's house. And that dog knows whether you're good or bad. And if you're bad, you go back to where you came from, and you continue to walk the earth in sorrow and causing fright and problems to the humans that live here. Other animals also figure in Native American spirituality. And one is the rattlesnake. And the rattlesnake is usually associated with rebirth because he sheds his skin. Also sexuality and fertility because of the way he moves. And fertility means not only human fertility, but also agricultural fertility. And snakes and snake images are often found in farmsteads. Snake walls, serpent walls are often associated with 18th and 19th century Native American farmsteads in Connecticut. And the rattlesnake is the timber rattlesnake, is the spirit animal of the Skedikook tribe. Colony and state recognized tribe ever since the first English settled in Connecticut. And they have a reservation in Kent, Connecticut. The wolf, associated with power, strength, courage, loyalty, is the spirit animal of the Mohegan tribe, a federally recognized tribe as well as a state recognized tribe in southeastern Connecticut. The fox, associated with characters of noble, wise, observant, often considered a trickster, but very intelligent, is the spirit animal of the Mashantucket Pequot tribe. Again, another state and federally recognized Connecticut tribe who has a reservation in southeastern Connecticut. Now, I put the dragonfly in there because I just wanted to note that Native people also revere insects as well. And many of them have spiritual characteristics. And the dragonfly is associated with healing, transformation, and spiritual protection. In northern New England, some of the tribal people believe that the dragonflies are actually fallen warriors, Native American warriors. Next, please. Roger Williams was a Puritan from Massachusetts Bay Colony, but he didn't want to be, and it was sort of mutual. And so he left Massachusetts Bay and founded Providence, Rhode Island, and he lived a number of years with the Narragansett tribe in the 1640s. And he wrote a book in 1643 called A Key into the Language of America. And it was actually, ostensibly, it was about Eastern Algonquian languages, which all of the New England tribes spoke. But he also gave this wonderful window into Southern New England Native American lifeways. And in there, he talks about their great knowledge of astronomy. And he says that everybody knew all the names of the heavenly bodies, the constellations, the stars, even the children. And they could tell time by them. During the evening, they told time by the movements of the stars and constellations. And during the day, they told time by the movement of the sun. In fact, as he said, as we does by clocks and dials, indicating that they were fairly accurate use of this timepiece. Native Americans also used heavenly bodies as calendars for important tribal ceremonies. And the remains of those ceremonial sites dot the American landscape, including Southern New England. And there are quite a number of these stone ceremonial sites called ceremonial stone landscapes right in Connecticut. And in fact, I was telling Elizabeth that Elaine Thomas, who's a Mohegan Deputy Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and an expert on Native American ceremonial sites, she and I recently visited a number of sites on land trusts. So keep an eye out, folks. Right on the right there is a stone ceremonial site from Killingworth, Connecticut. It's a turtle effigy. Unfortunately, most of the site was destroyed for a housing project, but a small portion of it, including the portion that houses this turtle effigy and two other turtle effigies as well, was given to the Killingworth Land Trust. And this particular effigy, its head actually points to the winter solstice sunrise. Next, please. This is a quote from Governor William Bradford, who was the governor of Plymouth Colony. And he actually wrote a book on the history of Plymouth. And in it, he describes southern New England as a hideous and desolate wilderness, full of wild beasts and wild men, full of woods and thickets, representing a wild and savage hue. Well, it wasn't. In fact, it was actually a built environment by sophisticated non-Europeans, the Native Americans, who had an intensive knowledge of their physical world and managed it too. Next, please. And this is the bit about the first American environmental stewards. And one of the main ways they managed their environment was through controlled burning, also called bush burning. And we know that this is very effective because our own Connecticut DEEP has been using controlled burning to try and bring back the grasslands in portions of Connecticut. And the quote here is from Adrian van der Donck, who was a Dutch colonist of New Netherlands in 1650, wrote a book about it in 1650. And this quote is actually from that book. And he says, the Indians have a yearly custom of burning the woods, plains, and meadows in the fall of the year, when the leaves have fallen and when the grass and vegetable substances are dry, to thin out and clear the woods of all dead substances of grass, which grow better the ensuing spring. Now, there are a number of descriptions of Native people doing controlled burning in the Northeast, including in Connecticut. I actually read, it was from a history of Waterbury, I think. And I actually read where they described one of the natives of Waterbury doing a controlled burn that actually got out of control. And the only reason that they mention it in the book was that the Native American perished in the burn. But these are fairly common. And even earlier than van der Donck, in the 1630s, there's a Dutchman writing about these controlled burns. And they did more than making the area grow better. They also helped to control instantaneous forest fires that all of that dead wood would catch on fire and totally destroy the environment. Well, controlled burning helped to control that problem. It also, as I said, promoted grassland environments, but it also enhanced edge environments as well. That's the boundary between two different environments. And edge environments, white-tailed deer and turkey are two animals that just love edge environments. And they also happen to be two of the major staples for Native American peoples throughout the prehistoric and historic past. What else does it do? It also increases certain plant populations. For example, berries love disturbed environments. And that's what this burning disturbs the environment. And various brambles and blueberry bushes really grow well in such environments. And they were very important to the native environment. Native people ate berries fresh. They also dried them, put them in stews. And of course, berries are very important for you. We know today they're full of antioxidants as well as vitamins, anti-carcinogens as well. Another type of plant that these controlled burns greatly increase, because they also love disturbed environments, are these very seedy, what we consider weeds nowadays, especially if you have a vegetable garden. You hate to find one of these plants like amaranth or lamb's quarters, goosefoot, the Chenopodium in there, because each plant has hundreds of little poppy seed-like seeds on them. And once they drop those things, you have tons of them coming up. but they were actually a major staple for Native people all the way from 10,000 years ago into the historic present. And we know this because we have found these, especially Chenopodium seeds in archaeological contexts. In fact, an early archaic 10,000-year-old site in Ledyard actually contain Chenopodium. And they are extremely nutritious. And I'm just going to read this from Lamb's Quarters Alba. 1 cup of their seeds gives you 741% of the daily requirement for vitamin K, over 100% of the daily requirement for vitamin A, 74% for vitamin C, 41% calcium, and loads of vitamin Bs and minerals. So an extremely important food source for them. Next. Oh, I put this in. This is actually a painting by Len Tantillo, who's a very respected historic artist from upstate New York. And this is a painting of the Goldcrest site in East Greenbush, New York. It's actually on Papscony Island. It's no longer an island. It's now attached to East Greenbush. This was an archaeological site I directed in the 1980s. And we actually found, Len actually based this painting on the archaeological findings. We found a longhouse, we found several circular houses. We also found over on the right-hand side of that painting, you can see the cornfields. We found corn cobs. We found a great deal of artifacts and food remains. But the main reason I put this in, going back. Yeah, the main reason I put this in is because we were doing this archaeological study because there was a gas pipeline that was going under the Hudson from the west side to the east side through Papscony Island. And of course, they kept changing. We were doing an archaeological survey for them to ensure that they didn't harm any archaeological sites there. And of course, they kept changing the direction of the pipeline. So we were there for several years doing this. And we kept coming across, in our 50 centimeter test units, we kept coming across a layer of charcoal that obviously showed burning of the area. So we did, and this was before we even knew about controlled burning in the 1980s. So we didn't know what it was, but we knew it was burning. So we did a radiocarbon date on it, and it dated to 1000 AD. So it just proves that Native people were actually using controlled burning as an ancient conservation tool among Northeastern peoples way back then. So next slide. There are a number of steps that Native people took to preserve the natural order, to preserve balance. And one of them was population control. They actually did human population control by breastfeeding children till they were 4 or 5 years of age. And there was a taboo on sex when you were breastfeeding. So therefore, there were certainly not many children being born from women who were breastfeeding for 4 or 5 years. Not that it isn't impossible to become pregnant, but most likely not. They also, what else did they do with that? And there were also restrictions on menstruation, where menstrual blood was considered very detrimental to men. So men didn't go anywhere near women during the menstruation cycle. And and also warriors preparing for battle and uh, for other events um, did not practice any sexual activities. So there were a number of ways that they controlled their human populations. But they also controlled the plant and animal populations as well. For example, the sachem would assign various hunting territories to each family. And when I'm talking about family, I'm not talking about how we think about family, the nuclear family of mom and dad and kiddies. I'm talking about major extended families as grandparents, uncles, aunts, comprising the family. And so each of these extended families had specific hunting territories, and the boundaries were very clearly defined. And that was purposely done to prevent overkilling any of the food staples. Because obviously, if you overkilled on your hunting territory, nobody's going to let you into their hunting territory, and you starve to death. So that was a good way of controlling the population. Also, there was gender and age management of food animals. They didn't kill pregnant females. They rarely killed females who were of the age for reproducing. Also didn't kill young. Wild plant colonies were also maintained. And this is a quote from Gladys Tanaquidgeon. Gladys Tanaquidgeon was a Mohegan elder. She eventually became the medicine woman of the Mohegan tribe, lived to be 104 years old, but she was also an anthropologist. She worked for the federal government, among other tribes, and also worked for the very esteemed cultural anthropologist, Dr. Frank Speck, who did a great deal of work in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic among Native American peoples. And so, and this is from Gladys's book. She wrote, no, this isn't from Gladys's book. This is from her grandniece's book, Gladys Tanaquidgeon, Medicine Women of the Mohegan, where she quotes Gladys quite a bit, Melissa Fawcett Zobel, who is now the medicine woman of the Mohegan tribe. And Gladys says in that book that certain rules were observed when gathering the plants. They had rules. Do not pick the first plant of species desired, pick only what you need and leave some in reserve. And as Gladys says, the Indian practiced conservation in its true meaning. Gladys also talks about the ritual involved in hunting and in plant processing. And she says, again from that book, but Gladys, by the way, did write a book on the folk medicine of the Delaware. And in that book, she discusses a lot of the plant medicines that Native people used then and today. So this quote from Gladys: give thanks to animal and plant spirits with prayers and offerings. Wild animals are in general considered to exist in clan relationship with humans. That is a specific physical relationship she is talking about. She's not talking about any figurative or symbolic relationship. When she talks about clan relationship, that's a physical relationship, definitely physically related, as I mentioned before. A hunter is obliged to pray and to sacrifice tobacco to that animal spirit before starting on the hunt. And in northern New England, I've been told that hunters often after making a kill, actually sang to the animal spirit as an offering. Next, please. Now, storytelling is a powerful tool that Native people use to teach the younger generation about their cultural value system. And it was also a powerful tool to remind adults of their tribal duties. And this is, I have one up here, a short one that's many storytellers use when giving stories to children. In fact, our storytellers here at the museum often use stories about Gluskabe. Gluskabe is a cultural hero of New England Native peoples. He has supernatural powers, but he usually appears in human form. And there are many stories about Gluskabe. And I'm just going to read this one quickly because it just shows how Native people used storytelling as a way to teach their tribal members environmental stewardship. Long ago, Gluskabe went hunting, but all the animals decided to hide from him. His grandmother Woodchuck wove a magical game bag for him to use. Grandmother Woodchuck. Taking the bag, Gluskabe walked to a large clearing and called out, "All you animals, listen to me. A terrible thing is going to happen. The sun is going to go out and the world is going to end." Frightened, the animals asked Gluskabe how they would survive. "My friends," he said, "just climb into my game bag and you will be safe." Soon, all the animals in the world were in his bag. Gluskabe laughed and went home proudly to his grandmother. "Why must you always do things this way?" she said. "You cannot keep all the animals in a bag. They will sicken and die. There will be none left for our children and our children's children. It is also right that it should be difficult to hunt them. Then you will grow stronger trying to find them. And the animals will also grow stronger and wiser trying to avoid being caught. Then things will be in the right balance." And there again, in that one little two paragraphs, it shows major tenets that we talked about before, direct relationship with animals, human need to protect animals and keep the world in balance. Next, please. And this is the social value of storytelling, which basically I just went through. Teaches the place of humans as part of the natural world, teaches the importance of harmony in nature, and illustrates that any imbalances within the world, any misuse of our natural resources will bring disaster to human society, which is a central theme in Indigenous worldview. Next, please. Oh, and I just want to go through a few slides and talk about Native communities today and how they are practicing land stewardship. And the first one, of course, is the Schaghticoke tribe, which is as I said, was recognized by the colony and state of Connecticut since the very beginning of the colony. The tribes, this is a picture of their reservation. That's the Housatonic River. And in the background there is Schaghticoke Mountain. And it is basically at the confluence, the reservation was originally larger. It went up the Housatonic and to the confluence of the Housatonic River and Macedonia Brook. Macedonia Brook was originally called Schaghticoke River. In 2004, the Schaghticoke were actually federally recognized, and in 2005, the recognition was revoked after strong opposition and appeal by the state and by private organizations. It's presently divided into two tribes, the Schaghticoke Tribal Nation and the Schaghticoke Indian Tribe. Most of the people live off reservation because the reservation is mostly one big stony mountain filled with a lot of poisonous snakes. But both of these tribes are very proud of their reservation, of the natural beauty of the reservation, and both strive to keep ecological balance of their reservation homelands. For example, the reservation is famous for its rattlesnake dens, and as I said, the rattlesnake is the spirit animal for the Schaghticoke. They regularly patrol they know exactly where all the Schaghticoke dens are, as well as the other snake dens. There are some large copperhead dens up there too, and they regularly patrol them to make sure nobody is disturbing those dens. And they have been disturbed. In fact, in one instance, they noticed strangers up in the area, well off the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail runs through a portion of the reservation. They're moving the trail, so it will no longer be on the reservation. But it did historically run through there. And they noticed strangers in the woods and not on that trail. They reported it to the state police, and sure enough, they caught these guys coming off the mountain with rattlesnakes in their backpacks. So they are a state recognized tribe, and they have no money. So they don't have, they can't do a lot of fancy things with their environment like some of the federally recognized tribes that I'm going to talk about in the next slides. So next slide, please. And this is the Mohegan tribe, and they are federally recognized. They have a reservation in southeastern Connecticut, and they've done quite a bit, not only for their tribal reservation, but for the non-tribal people surrounding the reservation. They provided $11 million for a water project to ensure safe drinking water for the entire region. They paid $35 million to build an access road to prevent the casino's 11 million annual visitors to their casino before COVID. So they built an access road so it would circumvent the residential areas. Tribal members regularly volunteer in local environmental projects, such as the photo down there in the lower right, where they are cleaning up the campgrounds at Camp Harkness State Park, which is along the Sound south of them. And they also joined a number of Native Americans in a peaceful protest of the Dakota Access Pipeline and provided a hefty donation to the Standing Rock Sioux community to help them in that protest. Next. The Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. Mashpee Wampanoag are also a federally recognized tribe in Mashpee on Cape Cod. And they have a natural resources department. It partners with the Massachusetts Fish, Wildlife, and Natural Resources Commission to clean up all these illegal dump sites that occur on the town property in Mashpee, because of course it's a major way to go to the tourist centers in Cape Cod. They conducted an animal inventory on tribal lands in an effort to sustain New England cottontail populations there, which Most of us know that they've been plummeting because of the loss of grasslands. And they've also done quite a bit on trying to prevent soil erosion on Cape Cod. They also have a summer youth environmental science camp for their tribal members, and it teaches traditional ecological knowledge and Western conventional science concepts to show these middle school students how to keep their physical environment in balance as their spirituality tells them to. Next, please. And this is the Aquina-Wampanoag tribe on Martha's Vineyard, also a federally recognized tribe. And they built and maintain this water quality testing lab that you see on the right. It's the only certified water quality testing lab on the island and serves both the Wampanoag tribal members and the entire island. They monitor the beach waters as well as the air quality, and they provide weather information for the vineyard. Next, please. And the Passamaquoddy. Passamaquoddy, also federally recognized tribe located up in Maine, and their focus is on mitigating climate change. They've developed wind turbine sites on their tribal properties. They've been installing solar panels in tribal homes. And they have a very unique project that turns algae into diesel fuel to lower the carbon imprint. Another way of lowering the carbon imprint in the atmosphere is to improve their forest management project, which has 98,000 acres of forest. They also actually, for every tree they remove in lumbering, they actually plant more than one tree. So they will actually increase their existing acreage. Next, please. The spiritual stimulus for Indigenous land stewardship. Now, just to recap, the basis for their land stewardship is their spirituality and their philosophy of life. Humans are part of the natural world. It is not man versus nature, but man as part of nature. There is a major reverence for the land and its resources. They believe it's their duty to maintain the natural order, to keep balance and harmony within nature and between man and nature. Quantum physics and the Linnaeus system of animal and plant taxonomy and the general systems theory all support this Native American view of the physical environment and man's what word am I looking for here? Man's participation within the natural environment. Next, please. And this is my last slide, and I'm ending with a quote from my old colleague and friend, Trudy Lamb Richmond, who Trudy recently passed away. She was an elder of the Schaghticoke tribe. Trudy was also a past chairman of the tribe. She was an author, activist, educator, anthropologist. She had degrees in anthropology and in education. What else was she? She was just a wonderful person, a great loss to the tribe. Oh, and she was a master storyteller. And this quote is from a letter that she wrote in 1987 to her granddaughter, Wuniatsu. And she was talking about Native peoples and how there is not one big Native American community, not one big Native American culture. There are hundreds and hundreds of Native American societies, thousands if you count the archaeological societies, and there are hundreds of different Native American cultures. But she says, yet certain facts did not differ, and that is our respect for Mother Earth and an awareness and respect for all living things because we are relatives. Native American people have a special way of viewing the universe, believing that one must live in harmony with all living things. To us, maintaining that balance of nature is critical to survival. We are taught that the land does not belong to the people, but rather the people belong to the land. No one could say it better than Trudy Richmond. Thank you so much. That is the end of the talk, and I am happy to take any questions.
It's a really beautiful note to end on. I'm going to stop the screen share and invite anyone who has questions to type them into the chat box. We're so fortunate to have someone, Dr. Lavin, with your expertise here with us tonight. So if anyone has any questions, please don't be shy. Lori says, thank you, Lucy. So thank you. I did receive some questions by email earlier today, and we could start with those in case people need a moment to think of a question. Let's see. So here's a question specifically about Algonquins. So the question is, I've heard that our region was inhabited by the Algonquins. What was the estimated range, and was that range fluid or regionally or rigidly defined? How many clans or groups comprise the Algonquins? And yeah, that's a great question. Is Algonquin a language group or is that a tribal nation?
In New England, Algonquian is a language group, Eastern Algonquian specifically. Everyone in New England spoke Eastern Algonquian, but there were many dialects, and we know that many of the people speaking those dialects understood each other. So now I'm not quite sure what that person means by the range.
I don't know either, but I think that that's a really helpful clarification. Algonquin is a language group, not necessarily a specific tribe. So you could have, if I'm understanding you correctly, you could have many different communities speaking different dialects of the same language. Would it be fair to say it's a little bit how there are different dialects of, like, for example, Spanish or French, depending on where you travel in the world? There are different dialects that people can mostly understand each other, but there are different words or phrasings. Is that a good analog or not quite right?
Probably even closer if you're traveling probably through Mexico. Native American dialects there, they can understand, many of them can understand each other. It's even closer than French and Spanish and Italian are to each other.
Very interesting.
We have. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
The Moravian documents. The Moravians were a Protestant group who came to North America to proselytize Christianity, and some of them came to New York City, and went into Pennsylvania and found in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And others went up from those areas into New York and Connecticut. And there were actually Moravian missions, 2 Moravian missions in Connecticut, one at a Mohican village, Waquadnock in Sharon, and another one at the village of Scatticook. And they wrote profuse documents on their time spent at these missions. They actually did daily diaries and things. And one of the Moravian documents from Scatticook talks about how one of the Moravians was married to a German woman, a German Palatine woman from New York, who grew up among the Mohicans, the Mohicans, not Mohegans from South Connecticut, the Mohicans from Hudson Valley and northwestern Connecticut. And she spoke Mohican fluently. And when she came to Connecticut, she was able to speak with the Scatticook and the neighboring Putatak. And one of the English asked her if she understood them easily. And she said, very well. And they in turn said they understood her very well. So Mohican, and we aren't sure what they were speaking in Scatticook or at Putatuk. We think it was a variation of Eastern Munsee, but they all understood each other very well.
That's very interesting. I think it kind of highlights what you were saying earlier about the overlap of trade and the need to have these extended, connected societies. We have a terrific question from Michael, who says, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Michael would like to know what tribes still have a presence in Connecticut today. And Michael, I'm going to assume that you mean a reservation type presence, because people can live anywhere. And that's a great question.
Well, there are the state recognized tribes, which are the Scatticook with a reservation in Kent, Connecticut. There's the Golden Hill Pagusset with 1/4 of an acre left of their lands on the Trumbull-Shelton line. But they also have a several hundred acre reservation in Colchester that the state actually purchased it. They got a grant and they purchased the land, and the state of Connecticut recognizes it as a bona fide reservation. Then there are the Mohegan, federally recognized as well as state recognized, with a reservation in the Uncasville area of southeastern Connecticut. There's the Mashantucket Pequot, federally recognized with a reservation near the Ledyard area. I say near because since the federally recognized tribes are considered sovereign nations in themselves, then Mashantucket is actually, the reservation is actually considered their land. So it's a separate sovereign entity. And then there's the state recognized Eastern Pequot, who have a reservation in North Stonington, Connecticut. Now, that being said, those are the ones that are recognized by government entities, yet there are a number of other Native communities in Connecticut that are not recognized. The Nipmunk in northeastern Connecticut, who have been there ever since the first English came here, are not recognized for some odd reason. The Quinnipiac, who no longer have a reservation, but still live, many of them live in the areas of their homelands in the New Haven, East Haven, Branford area. the Wangunk. There are a lot of Wangunk people who had a huge homeland up and down on both sides of the Connecticut River, from like Durham and East Haddam on the south, all the way up to practically almost the Massachusetts border. They do not have a political entity, but the people are still present in Connecticut. And there are others too.
That's a great
Oh, and I
question.
should also say that there are people living in Connecticut, Native people, who belong to tribes from outside of Connecticut, but are residents of Connecticut. And then there are also a number, one of the state representatives said there were over 50,000 people in Connecticut who claim to have Native American ancestry, but do not belong to any particular tribe.
Really interesting question and fascinating answer that kind of just shows the depth and breadth of these communities. Another question that came in is from Jeff, who says he really enjoyed the talk and purchased your book as a result of this talk. So everyone, I will include
thank you, Jeff.
I will include Dr. Lavin's book in the follow-up materials I send if anyone's interested. Jeff currently lives in the Pacific Northwest, but was born and raised in Connecticut. He wonders how involved are Indigenous peoples in current land conservation practices in Connecticut, and what would you suggest that could be done or explored to better honor their wisdom for our present and future practices?
Well, I think I covered the conservation in the talk on what, especially the federally recognized tribes who have lots of money, are really not only preserving their environments, but they're improving them. And of course, the state recognized tribes are attempting to do so as well, but don't have the money that the federally recognized do. I must say that their traditional wisdom is amazing. I was brought up Catholic, and once you're a Catholic, you're always a Catholic, as far as I'm concerned. I still watch the Mass on television, even though I don't go to it. But that being said, I greatly admire Native American thought, their philosophy of life, their spirituality, whatever you want to call it. Native people, unlike Westerners, spirituality just seeps into everything. It involves everything, whether they're preparing food, whether they're taking a trip. Everything has spirituality in for traditional Native people. So when I call it spirituality, philosophy of life, that's all one and the same. I greatly admire it, and I try to follow a lot of it because I think it's very logical, it's organized, and as I hope to have shown, our Western science support what they believe. And I just think that respect for all animal and plant life, if you try to do no harm. And it's the same thing with the hiking motto, do no harm, and attempt to increase, join your animal protection societies, even not only the local ones, but things like the American bison and Yellowstone Park are endangered. And I mean, just join those type of things. Climate control. I mean, things like promoting things that are not harmful or toxic to our environment. And I think that's a great way of supporting Native American wisdom.
I agree. I also was really interested to hear you say that controlled burning to restore grasslands is gaining traction even here in Connecticut. That's fantastic. We have time for just one more question if anyone would like to enter it. Any kind of question, comment. And we do have one that was submitted by email. It is it is a question comment combo. It is one of the lasting names here is the quote, last chief Squance. We have to this day Squance Pond, and it has a place known as Council Rocks. What do we know about this generation and the descendants of that generation? And I think that is a really great question. We live in a place where we do have a lot of place names derived from Algonquin words and people. So I guess I'll add on to this question. Was Squance a real person? Is this a place name, a person name? Do we know?
You know, a problem with that is a lot of the old documents were destroyed in a fire for New Fairfield area. That's the area that this person's talking about, New Fairfield, Sherman, and including a lot of the documents that mention deeds and Native people and that. But as I can recall, Squance is apparently a real person, and I believe he is mentioned in later histories of the area. And I've been trying to find out who he is, to tell you the truth, because there was also a possibility that he may have been related to Mawihu, who is Gideon Maui, who was the grand sachem of the Schaghticoke tribe. There's a lot of oral tradition around that, not only Native oral tradition, but New York oral tradition that claims that that Maui was the grandson of a woman. Well, actually, that Mount Sassacus was the grand sachem of the Pequots. And during the Pequot War, the Pequots came up through Western Connecticut to try and get away from the English who were following them. And Sassacus, and he was with his family at the time, comes through the plains of Kent and into eastern New York, the Dover Plains area, and they leave. Apparently, they leave the women and children there, and he and his counselors go northward to reach the Mohawk, but they are killed. And who they're killed by, we're not quite sure. There's some evidence uncovered by Kevin McBride that Pynchon, who owns a trading house in Massachusetts, is told by the Mohawk that he was killed by the Moheag. Now, who the Moheag are we? Moheag. Now, is that the Mohegan from Southeastern, or is that the Mohican from the Hudson Valley? We don't know. Anyway, but his, and what I'm trying to say is that the Mohegan women and children stayed behind, and they were in Algonquian territory there, and apparently intermarried with the people there. And supposedly, one of Sassacus's daughters married a local leader, and Maui is the product of that marriage. And And it makes sense because that would make sense that he becomes a leader so quickly. He actually signs deeds in New York when he is in his teens. And he signs at the top with Warramog, who is the Grand Sachem of the Wiantanok. And if you sign at the top, that's where the leaders usually sign. So, and the Moravians talk about Mauihu as being a cousin of the Grand Sachem of the Mohicans, who's living in Stockbridge at that time. So there's a mess there. But I'm wondering if I really was interested if one of the local men who married that Pequot woman was related to Squants, or possibly, you know, in that descent. And I wish I could have told you more, but as I said, if that person can find the early documents that I can't find, it would probably be very helpful.
That's making me think of, if anyone from Sherman is with us, there's a lake Mauihu. I'm not pronouncing it right, I'm sorry, but in Sherman. So that's very interesting. These people live on in place names.
Yeah, that's a late name. That's a late name for that, though. So
Oh, okay.
But there has been some writing, and I can't remember exactly where, tying Gideon Maui to that Sherman New Fairfield area as being the sons of Squants, I think it was, or the leader in that area. So don't quote me on that Squants thing, but and as I said, there's no evidence that supports that. Yet there must be something going on, some type of oral tradition among the locals there that says that, you know, that may be true. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And I think that is all of the questions. Oh, one question: is your book available as an audiobook?
Is that Kindle? I
Um,
don't know what Kindle is, but I know it's in Kindle.
it's like book on tape, and it could be listened to on a Kindle.
Well, it is out in Kindle, and you can also find it at a lot of the libraries. So try your library for it.
You love to support our local libraries. They do.
And
great.
may I also make a plug for the new book that I edited?
Absolutely.
The new book, hot off the presses from the State University New York Press. It's, oh my gosh, what's it called? Wait, I've got it here and I can probably hold it up for you.
A show and tell feature. That's wonderful.
It's called Dutch and Indigenous Communities in 17th Century Northeastern North America. What archaeology, history, and indigenous oral traditions teach us about their intercultural relationships. And let's see, here it is. And it's got a wonderful painting by Len Tontillo that he kindly allowed me to use. I am the editor. I do have, it's 10 chapters. There are 4 of the chapters actually deal with Connecticut and the Dutch in Connecticut because the Dutch were so involved. Some of the earliest, not only the Dutch at the House of Good Hope in Connecticut, but the Dutch also had a fort at Brantford. They had one at Saybrook. It's possible they had them in other areas like maybe Middletown. And the Dutch had settlers. They weren't just traders. They actually had settlers in in fact, the House of Hope had settlers up there, and a bowery, which is a farmstead. The first people to settle Sharon and Canaan were the Dutch. And Salisbury, the Dutch bought land from the Mohicans in Salisbury in 1685. So if you can't buy this book, get it through your library, because it's really important, especially for educators. It just shows that the Dutch should have a much greater part in our school systems, our school teachings. That's it. That's my plug.
Wonderful. Well, I am going to wrap up this evening's presentation by first, Dr. Lavin, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this wonderful presentation. Again, if anyone with us has not visited the Institute for American Indian Studies, it is in Washington. I will be sending out an email tomorrow morning with some resources, and if anyone's interested in doing further learning, names of books that were discussed, and a link to the museum's website if you're interested in doing a little hands-on visiting of our local history. And with that, I will conclude the evening, and I really want to thank everyone for spending their night with us. This talk has been recorded, and I will be posting it online, and so you can rewatch if you want to see it again. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for participating.
All right, everybody, enjoy their evening.